Hello, hello. Does that sound okay with everyone? Awesome. Welcome to the Activating Streets and Pedestrian Network session. I hope y'all are enjoying the Public Space Summit so far. I'm Susanna Fraker with the San Francisco Parks Alliance. I'm a senior project manager in our capital team, and I'm really happy to be here today with our lovely panelists.
Hi, I'm Warren C. Davis, the other project manager at San Francisco Park Alliance, spearheading our capital projects in the department, and super excited to have all y'all here and our wonderful panelists, so I'll pass it off to them.
Hello. And this is just a brief intro, right? Yes.
Actually, before I pass it off to you guys, so there's handouts here, and there's also this QR code that you're welcome to scan, and it has, it can link you to some of the websites that these folks are part of, and contact information as well if you want to reach out later as well. And let's see, I'm going to pass it off to Katy.
And sorry, we're just going into the presentations, right now? Yes? Yeah. Okay, all right. So hello, everybody. My name is Katy Birnbaum, and I'm the Associate Director for the nonprofit Livable City. You might know us from the Sunday Streets SF program. So just out of curiosity, how many folks know about the Sunday Streets program? All right, great. I'm not going to go into what the Sunday Streets program is then. Instead, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what happened to us during the pandemic and how we came out on the other side and what we've got planned for the future. So, let's see here. Oh. Sorry. All right. So, it was the eve of the first Sunday Streets of 2020. It was the Friday night, and we got the word from the Public Health Department that we were going to have to shut down the first Sunday Streets of the year. So we went from planning a 20,000 person event to canceling a 20,000 person event for the first time in the program's history. Pretty shortly after that, we were drawn back out to the street to bring the spirit of Sunday Streets back out to San Francisco. As many of you know, streets and the power of temporary open space that they create was a major, major resource during the pandemic. So by June of 2020, we were already out in the street serving kind of the hardest hit neighborhoods in San Francisco with temporary open space. That includes SoMa, Tenderloin, Bayview, Excelsior, and other communities also around the city that we're not mentioning now, but all sorts of folks. All of these programs were scheduled, or they were planned in partnership with neighborhood-based CBOs, and they used whatever kind of tools we had on hand during the pandemic, which is play streets, shared spaces, and kind of emergency measures there. We continued that work all throughout the 2020 year with different communities. There we go. I said different communities all throughout the city. The work allowed us to really pool resources and be able to have the cultural competence of neighborhood-based CBOs married with the resources of like citywide health and employment resources that were desperately needed during the pandemic. We continued this work into 2021 and formalized it in what was called the Rise Together season, which again continued with these kind of smaller format events in partnership with CBOs. And it all culminated in the first annual Phoenix Day on October 17th of 2021. On that Phoenix Day, we were able to bring the magic of Sunday Streets all across the city because we blew up the format of an open streets program and really put it into the hands of neighbors across from every corner of the city. So collectively, we were able to activate 30 neighbor-run block parties. We had 5 corridor retail activations. We had a 20-mile bike ride that had 100 mixed-level riders participate, and dozens of community improvement projects that were organized and led by community members, and I said all across the city. Here are some cute photos of all the magic that was made possible by community members on Phoenix Day. Um, very eclectic gatherings of folks, depending on the neighborhood. Every neighborhood had its own flair and its own programming. And let's see, here's the activations from Valencia, where we partnered with Carnival, in Chinatown. Here in the Tenderloin, where we created a pop-up forest. Here in the Excelsior with music and outdoor dining. In the Bayview with art programming and free food giveaways. Our bike rides, our practice bike rides, leading out before the event and then actually riding out on event day. And now we're heading into the 2022 Phoenix Day celebration on October 16th of this year. So we are now working to make Phoenix Day a San Francisco institution on the third Sunday of every year, where we're going to celebrate sustainability and community wellness in the streets of San Francisco. And we are inviting everybody to participate this fall. All right, and I'm going to pass it to Mario.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mario de Mira, and which is it, the up button or the down button? Okay. All right, there we go. So good afternoon. I'm Mario de Mira with SoMa Pilipinas, the Filipino Cultural Heritage District in the south of Market. I'm going to kind of talk about the intersection of activating streets through the public realm design, and then having like a racial justice, racial equity, and economic equity framework to help guides our work. And then how that plays a role in our community stabilization strategies overall. So just a quick recap of who we are. You know, our history, Filipinos have been in the south of Market for over 100 years, back before when it was you know, light industrial, warehouse, working class community. And we are still there, and we're fighting tooth and nail to exist and remain, especially as, you know, the financial district expands further kind of south. And so, you know, through that time and through that history, through kind of like people power organizing and advocacy, our community has really, in that 100-year history, built our own institutions, nonprofit organizations, art organizations, theaters. We have Bessie Carmichael's school and after-school program. So, you know, that kind of robust, keeping our community together attitude and mission is still there. The conditions that we face, you know, in I've heard numbers like in the last 10 years, we've lost 50% of our residents, from 5,000 to 2,500. And we continue to face just, you know, insurmountable odds around displacement. But we do have victories, like we do have a lot of tenants organizing themselves and, you know, pushing back against this displacement. And why the public realm actually has a role in preventing displacement or pushing back against displacement. You know, we have a great ecosystem of community-based organizations that either provide services to tenants, youth, the homeless, et cetera. And our role and position is really around policy and public realm and the arts. And so we believe that the public realm, influencing the public realm through recognizing the historical communities, is really planting the flag for those historical communities. SoMa Filipinas is part of 8 other designated cultural districts throughout the city. And I don't want to say that just because you've been recognized by the, you know, the city hall or the government that validates you, because I think communities and historical communities are everywhere. But it's really a strategy even adopted by the city to preserve our communities, historical communities here in San Francisco. So, so that's kind of, you know, who we are, and you can see from these pictures, you know, I'm a very visual person of just, you know, exactly what I've said, like the intersection of all those things. But the point is really around community stabilization. One more time. Thank you. Thank you, Susan. And then just to kind of get more specific around some of the public realm projects that we're working on. So for example, we have, we've had 2 versions of pole banners that have gone all over this, the district. This has been a partnership with SFMTA, and then also, or I'm sorry, DPW, and then also working with a private banner company. But really the beauty about this project was the community involvement. We got parents, families, workers in the district to do photo shoots at YBCA, and really kind of help design the banners. And it really represents, again, literally that planting the flag to say we're here, you know, like we can't erase these communities. So the pole banners are up, take a look next time you're in the district. We have a community identity plaque. 6th Street is going under you know, reconstruction project right now with DPW. And we're working with them, and they're also working with the 2 other cultural districts, the transgender district and the leather district, to honor this legacy. And they'll be placing plaques along 6th Street between Market and Howard that really recognizes all the cultural districts. So these are some of our iconic Filipinx heroes and sheroes that have been selected to be imprinted into the streets. The third is our street signage. This is a partnership with SFMTA. And the final thing that I really want to highlight is, this is literally our big lift, is the Cultural District's Gateway, which is supposed to be on Russ and Folsom. And this is a project that, you know, it's been, I think the learning lesson behind this is that the different departments that you kind of have to go through to get a project like this underway, and then even understanding that dynamic between city departments and community organizations. And just to be real, like, I think some of the challenges around working with planning and you know, the resources that community has to be able to, you know, hire architects to help us think, you know, about the strategy and all the kind of technical aspects of the work, versus like a large developer who has infinite resources that can work with the city and get things just, you know, streamlined and pipelined so quickly. So those types of challenges exist, but I think that once this is created, you know, this will be one of like the most important and significant physical objects in the neighborhood in terms of the public realm. And this is kind of, for any of you, I don't know who our audience is, but, you know, would love to connect with you all on what are the resources, what are the strategies that we can leverage to get these things done, because especially for a project like this is where the financing really comes into play. With some of the other projects, we've been able to, you know, the city's covering, DPW is doing the plaques. We were able to create, you know, raise funds for the banners, but the gateway's literally the big lift. So sorry if I went over time, but just wanted to share all that with you. Thank you.
Does it work? Oh, you want to?
I'm sorry. Last thing, the 26th, we have a film about the historical displacement of residents from the Yerba Buena redevelopment. It's going to be at Copwell Garden, May 26th, 5 to 8 p.m. Go to our website.
Hi, everyone. My name's Erica. I work for SoMa West Community Benefit District. My role is, I'm called the Director of Placemaking, and it's really to activate exactly what this panel is about, activate our streets, do events, create public art, all of the sort of feel-good things that the reason that we're all in this room and together. So I consider myself to be very fortunate to be paid to do this, and I see it as my responsibility to work with community members like yourselves, like Mario and SoMa Filipinas, to get things done and to leverage my paycheck, basically. You know, I'm paid to do this work, to make things easier for community members to be proactive and to sustain the work. So whether that's help with permitting, helping fundraise, planning events, that's what I see the potential role of an organization like a community benefit district as being. So I want to talk a little bit about what activating streets means to me. And I think fundamentally, for me, it's about shifting people's perception of what's possible. And I think that a lot of people in this room probably can relate to that with all of the exciting things with Sunday Streets and Slow Streets. It's really, I think, helping shift that narrative that streets belong to cars, and they can be so much more for us. And my history is, my career has been working in really dense neighborhoods that have happened to both have a lot of alleyways. And so I find myself thinking about alleyways all the time. And unfortunately, you know, they tend to live in a lot of people's minds as back streets where nefarious things happen, where, you know, just unsightly places that aren't for pedestrians, which I think is a shame, and which I'm trying to help shift in my neighborhood right now. They're really opportunities because they're not as intimidating as these larger thoroughfares that SoMa especially has, that are very much car-centric. Alleyways are they're more potential for a pedestrian like neighborhood feel. And so the role of a CBD, part of what we do is clean up the streets, but also I want to help empower residents and business owners to look at their alleyways as resources and see the potential behind them. So these images are actually from Russ Street, which is where I'm really glad to be on this panel with Mario from SoMa Pilipinas, because they have this grand idea for Russ Street, and we were given this opportunity with the city to have, you know, the holly jolly cable car truck with carolers, and so this was put together in weeks, literally, with like no funding, just borrowing furniture, renting lights, and you know, it can be really lightweight. The things we're talking about. It can be really inexpensive. You don't have to spend a ton of money. And this event, you know, we had the TNT karaoke machine, we had Christmas carolers. All of a sudden, you see the community, especially the Filipino community, understand the potential of what the Russ Gateway could be as a gathering space. And so I'm really, really proud to have been part of this. And moving on. This is when I was in Lower Polk, and this is Austin Alley, and it's actually one of the first shared spaces permits that was given out by MTA in 2020. And we partnered with the businesses along this corridor to close it down for pedestrian seating. And that's all it is. It's like we put out chairs and we made it possible for the businesses to do this, and it helped keep them in business, and it just activated the street. And because we did the heavy lifting, the businesses then, you know, paid for a musician to come out and play. And so I really see the role of placemakers as facilitating the people that are there every day, to do the work and continue to do the work. This is Sidewalk Cinema, one of my proudest moments, where we closed down Fern Street, an alleyway along Polk, for outdoor cinema. And again, it doesn't take much. Like, throw out some turf and some chairs, and find good partners to do awesome outdoor screenings. So we worked with the SF Urban Film Festival to program this space, and the films that were shown were about these spaces that aren't your homes, aren't your work, but third places where you can gather with community and build community. So that's the film that was, one of the films that was shown was actually a film called 12 Pianos, and it's by the folks at Sunset Piano, and they do flower piano at the park. And we had them roll out a piano afterwards, and this was at the end of the event, and random neighbors just came out and played, and it was amazing. And I watch this video when I need inspiration and like to feel good about what I'm doing. So yeah, thank you. I don't know if it works. Oh, yes. So all of that is wonderful and beautiful, and I'm so proud of that work, but I included this because I think that I want to be totally honest with peers, and like I said, I work for a CBD, and we're really fortunate that we have people that help us clean up the streets on a daily basis in neighborhoods that desperately need it, and I don't know what your neighborhood is like, but there are ways, even if you don't have a CBD, to keep things clean and to keep things active. It just takes a lot of work, to be honest. But like I showed you an image of Fern in its best state, but without the constant cleaning, without light, even just like the most lightweight of activations of like kids playing ball in the street, or without that, it can go back to what it was, which is like a back street for not so positive activity. So it doesn't have to be a massive, beautiful outdoor screening. It can be super lightweight, but it's really important that you do stuff to keep it active. So, yeah. Thanks.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sergio Suarez. It's such a pleasure to share energy and space with you all. So, executive director of this grassroots nonprofit titled All the Way Life Foundation. We utilize hip hop dance not only to empower, support, uplift, educate historically marginalized youth, but we're there to kind of be that mentorship and femtorship for a lot of these youth. I also have a production company titled Creative Grounds Production, and that's kind of the intersection of what I'm going to be speaking on today. Click. And so about a couple years ago, I had a friend of mine who's seen my work, and he was like, hey, you know what? I got something called Skybridge on Stevenson. I really would love your support on this. And part of that discussion was like, and I focus on this picture, and I know it's just a hug, but it's really more of an embrace. Right, and that tends to kind of be the work that I get into. And so how do I embrace this idea? How does our initiative, how does Skybridge on Stevenson not only embrace, this idea, but also the individuals of this community? And so that became the seed, that became the root of how do we embrace. And so next, we'd love to kind of show y'all just a little bit of what that embrace looks like. So what we just witnessed is what I would call that embrace. And when creating events, and I've created produced events, literally all over the world. And every time I produce something, I'm always like, well, are we producing something? Like, who are we producing for, right? And part of hip hop is that the audience isn't an audience, right? We're not producing for an immobile, kind of stagnant individual. It's part of it is that. The audience then becomes a participant. So how do you create events where the audience is participating? And so kind of what you're witnessing there is that embrace to allow individuals to feel celebrated, to feel heard, to feel affirmed. And that's, again, at the very core of hip hop. So anyways, check us out, skybridgeonstevenson.org.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing the work that you're doing. Thank you to the panelists for being here. I feel like I got so excited to hear from them. We didn't get the chance to fully introduce them, but I just really feel the need to emphasize that these folks are working on the ground, dedicating their life work, their some volunteer hours, and it's all towards making streets safer, better, more beautiful. And at the foundation of all of that is their relationships with community members. And I just really feel like really honored to have you all here with us today. Thank you. And I wanted to kind of riff off of what Sergio was saying about having community members and participants of a block party, or like Skybridge on Stevenson, a music and dance festival, how maybe spectators could be part of the actual event and become part of the experience. I wanted to ask a question to the panelists. What are some sort of thoughts and ideas for how to make that happen? You know, we can curate these events and these activations on streets, but what are some things that we can do to help everyday people kind of feel part of it and want to take ownership or stewardship over it? Maybe I can kick it off to Katy. Why don't you go?
Well, that was very much at the core of the Phoenix Day program that we presented in 2021, is really just making the tools to create these spaces, which are kind of boring. It's a permit, it's some barricades, it's some liability insurance. Those are the tools. Those are the nuts and bolts tools. They're a little bit tricky to get in this city, unfortunately. So how we focused on it and how we invited everybody to show up in their big, beautiful selves and focus on that was to give them those tools in a really streamlined way. And it exploded. I mean, as you saw, we had 30 neighbor-run block parties. We were not curating those. We were not the ones doing the outreach. We were not the ones making the programming. We were not the ones staffing the barricades. All we did was get a permit. We ordered the barricades and sent it to them and got some liability insurance. But it's giving them those tools so that they can focus on being themselves, right? Embracing their community, bringing out their culture, bringing out the things that are going to uplift them and make them excited to come out.
From a different viewpoint, I think that, like, in the larger scheme, seeing small changes over time, seeing one event happen can get people like, oh, what's this about? And that's how you can start to build those relationships and find your stewards. But it's really about seeing that change happen and seeing that progress happen, and seeing, like, one neighbor has an idea that they want lighting right there. And if you're able to pull through something smaller and lightweight like that, that builds an enormous amount of trust and motivation for people to get involved, is my experience.
I was going to actually ask another question in regards to, I'm one of the project managers over Stevenson Street, where Sergio works on, and I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with Stevenson Street, how rough it is down there, but really hinting at what does it all take, and I'm pointing this question to Sergio, to get that involvement, but just not one time, but to have that involvement repeatedly over and over and be successful.
Yeah, thank you for that context. And for just, so Skybridge on Stevenson is a 10-week program. It's every Thursday from, I think we start in September and then in November. We're about to do our third iteration of it. And ideally, I think it's, you have to be fluid. You must, especially in communities that live on that fluidity, right? That uncertainty. And so I think that a lot of times, so to kind of center that, to anchor that fluidity, to know that next week's going to be completely different, right? There's some, you can relax a little bit on that, but ultimately knowing that, at the very core of what Skybridge on Stevenson is kind of what I spoke on earlier. It's an embrace, embracing, I guess, that uncertainty, still being able to provide, amazing entertainment. But again, we're there to celebrate, right? We're not necessarily like a show. We're there to kind of more honor the community, the artists, and something magical happens. There's something around having this unscripted, band who will show up who they're not rehearsed. They're just like, all right, on three, okay, 1, 2, and they just go, and you just so even within the music, it's sometimes a lot of unscripted, but again, that's where the beauty and magic happens, is that there's a form of freedom, right? When yes, we can be very rigid, we can stick to an itinerary, we will have our permits and all that. Yes, you will need all of that. But if at the very core you're okay with that idea of freedom, to liberate yourselves, we're going to liberate ourselves for the next 4 hours, hit the music. I think that the individuals, especially within that community, it was just amazing to see them just kind of funnel down, and to see their own humanity, to be like, yeah, let's dance. Yeah, get your wheelchair up here. Let's spin it in circles. Absolutely. That's, gosh, just to be able to do that a few hours a week, the connections, relationships start to build. And so that's my advice.
Question? Additional question?
Yeah, sure. So I actually wrote down this quote here from Jane Jacobs that I love. Streets and their sidewalks, the main public places of a city, are its most vital organs. And I think it's so true in that how we see our streets and the pedestrian networks in San Francisco, sort of how vibrant they are, how safe they feel, how vegetated or beautiful they look, really is a determining factor for how, sort of the health of the city and how people value their places. So I wanted to pose a question to the panel: is, what does a pedestrian network look like in San Francisco? And then I guess also kind of attached to that, why is actually activating these streets important to the health and the vibrancy of them? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, so like I said, I work in SoMa, and I really do view in particular the alleyways as a network and as a potential network that needs a lot of improvement. But these are spaces that are on a pedestrian scale, and for the health of cities, you want people out and about and walking around and not in cars. So I feel like it's up to us as people that are interested in the public realm to make these spaces as welcoming as possible to encourage that behavior. And I know that we're here for Parks Alliance, and parks are vital to cities, as we know. But what is the walk to the park like? And in a lot of neighborhoods, it's not great. And so that's the question that I'm always asking myself is well, what is that walk like for people? Anyone else?
So, answer to the question is, what does the pedestrian network look like in San Francisco? Patchy, I would say. So we have some neighborhoods that have what is, coming close to, I would say, a beautiful, pedestrian network, where the sidewalks are wide enough and, the streetscape is welcoming and there's destinations to go to. But as Erica was saying, there's a lot of neighborhoods that don't have that at all, and then there's also not really the connective tissue between these neighborhoods to say that we legitimately have a pedestrian network in San Francisco. We have neighborhoods that have pedestrian networks within them. And so what is the importance of these activations? This is how we create that thread. These are the mycelium network that actually makes that a permanent pedestrian network. It creates the intention, it creates the energy, it creates the care on those spaces that don't have that infrastructure. They don't have the sidewalks, they don't have the trees. So what can we do? We can get a permit, and we can and we can throw down a a dance floor, and we can have music, and we can have a day where it is a pedestrian network for that day, and it's full with people for that day. And that is how we're going to eventually create the momentum that is going to have and realize a real pedestrian network across the city.
So I do want to kind of interrupt or pivot the conversation, because I feel like the last two answers that we've gotten have been around this idea of programming, which is totally amazing, activating the streets. But I want to point this question towards Mario. And I really would love to understand the importance of identity in your neighborhoods and how you and your community are able to leverage culture, essentially, in your guys' line of work.
I think it's, if you were, born and raised here, or you're a transplant or whatever, I think one thing we can all unite on is that one of the things that we love the most about San Francisco is its diversity, right? And we're at a critical kind of juncture in the city where we could lose that. Like we're fighting to like keep that balance or keep that character. And so, I think it's pretty basic. I think that cultural representation enhances so much in everything that we're doing, whether it's activation, whether it's fairs, and whether it's the public realm, to just any type of programming, right? But it also serves other purposes in terms of giving voice to a lot of communities that often feel silent and just unheard and unrepresented. And so for a lot of our historical communities, especially those that are working class or poor, and that's across the racial spectrum, being able to participate in activation, in public realm work is really important, because they feel a sense of voice, they feel a sense of democracy, that they are participating in some way civically in aspects of their city. So that's kind of like, I guess like a principal thing. And then other aspects that are also important around cultural representation is that, through the activation, we also create, workforce and economic development opportunities for small businesses, for at-home businesses, for, people that cater or are like cooks out of their homes, for artists. We've been able to hire a lot of local artists to create, either renderings or actual pieces of public art. And so it's like all of these different things that are accomplished when you think about cultural representation, and then also addressing the communities that have, by and large, been kind of left out of the conversation and out of the planning. So, and to that, I think it's just really important to think about a really deep and comprehensive plan for your outreach of whatever you're doing. You know what I mean? I think we can all get comfortable with like the regular faces in the room, and I think that's kind of something that happens a lot. But within like our individual communities and neighborhoods, there's such a range of groups and people, and we just have to be mindful that representatives of those groups are all at the table when talking about the projects that we want to initiate. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think in regards to Skybridge, I'm a man of color. I'm going to keep it loyal to the soil, and so in that sense, we had a couple of like opera singers come by. We had a couple, more arts that have been created for stage, right? And it was just like a huge, contrast. And therefore I was like, well, let's keep it, true to these streets. Where's my street dancers at? Where are the ones who literally, we have a lot of indigenous movements created right here in San Francisco. Where are those strutters out on Pier 39? Let's get them out here, right? And so, by highlighting just indigenous movements, man, y'all should have seen it. It's just like the individuals, the folks who, so San Francisco, and to not highlight San Francisco, because the art's it's so vast, and so in regards to just cultural awareness, we were very particular in like, well, who are we designing for? Mm-hmm. Whose arts ultimately? I get this is cool. Everyone needs a stage, but not all, artistical movements were meant for a stage. Sometimes we're really right here on the streets. And so when you have all these amazing street dancers come by, man, that energy some Thursdays, I mean, it was like someone cranked up the knob to 10 and broke it. It was just that potent, where like literally everyone who was walking down, one night we had a Grubhub guy who heard just music on his way to deliver food, stopped his bike, finished, started dancing with us for an hour, and then was like, yo, I got to get this food back to its owner. But that's, he actually won the Best Dancer of the Night award, yeah. But to kind of show, that to create like, an inviting space where an individual on his, way to deliver food can stop and say, let me participate, right? That's inviting, right? Anyone, it's not, I'm going to walk up, I'm going to be stagnant, right? It's a different, and so therefore, all that's to simply say that was intentional in our design, but, definitely having that cultural awareness to also suggest whose artistries are we highlighting and for who, so.
Well, that's been very wonderful. I want to thank our panelists. At this time, we do have a couple more minutes remaining in the session, so we do want to open up to the room for a general Q&A for y'all to kind of, like Sergio was saying, get involved in the conversation. So if anyone has any questions, we have a floating mic with our lovely assistant in the back, so we can begin that process. Yes, we have a question over here.
Thank you. Oh, great. Hi, thanks everyone. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about if you've received any pushback to this programming, because as we know, cars are dominant in this city and most cities, and using streets for purposes other than cars often gets pushback. So I would love to hear how you've dealt with that. And then conversely, if you feel like by activating streets, you've heard from the community that there's a shift happening away from this idea that streets can only be for cars.
All right, yeah. Yes, we close miles of city streets to cars, and we theoretically would get the biggest, hugest pushback. Is there some pushback from cars that are randomly trying to get to point A to point B? Yes, there's some, there's traffic that happens, but shockingly, actually, by and large, people love these spaces. The neighbors and the neighborhoods love these spaces. And the biggest tool that we've had in moving the needle in those conversations is, one, listening. It's, it cannot just be a one-way, this is the best thing, and it is inherently the best thing because it has no cars. Yes, I mean, that's, when we're among friends, we can say that, but you have to have a real dialogue, so you've got to listen, and then it creates an actual real dialogue there. And then it really is a framework of empowering the neighbors to go talk to their own neighbors. Like if you are an organization, if you're an agency coming in to try to do something, it is always going to be one dynamic in that conversation. But if you can get the neighbors to talk to each other, and if you can get them to be the faces of the thing that is going to happen, it moves the needle in a completely different way. And also, you're never going to, this is the battle of our lifetime, right? Like moving away from cars is the battle of our lifetime. We're not going to see the end of it. None of us in this room are going to see the end of it. So are we going to get pushed back for the rest of our lives? Yes. Do we still need to do it? Yes. And so it is really kind of where you put your energy and where you put the resources for the people that are going to move that needle, bit by bit. So that is kind of like my, yes, there is pushback, but you've got to do it, and you've got to empower the people that are happy, joyous, moving towards it. And if you empower them with the tools to talk to their neighbors and to hold this space, it alleviates all the pressure from you as an organization and all the pressure from you as an agency. And it is magic, and that's how we're going to move towards that future that we all need to be in.
A few years ago, there was a lot of buzz about street murals or intersection murals, and like I know Walk SF was into it, and then I don't know, like the city had some issues with it. Do any of your areas have permanent murals in the street or anything like that? Or what? Do anyone know what the status of all that is? 'Cause
Yeah, official status is this is still not legal. It's still not a thing that can happen. Are there some street murals out in the public realm? Yes, there are. They are not permitted, and they're also intermittently being maintained, also kind of consequently because of that. It is something that needs to happen. It is an opportunity, and it's an opportunity for everybody in this room to push for. And I thank you for asking this question in this space. We need it to happen. It is a proven tool to calm streets in a way that San Francisco needs. It's a way to bring in culture into these street calming kind of projects, right? That make it much more accessible to the people that may or may not want those street changes. But it is not here. It is tucked somewhere between Public Works thinking that it's graffiti and SFMTA being scared that it might confuse drivers and or conflict with state regulations on what is okay for drivers to see on the street. Other places do that. Portland does it. Other cities do it completely. It's possible. It's just a matter of everybody in that approval chain understanding it's possible and it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, so right now, the only version of mural that I've seen is like a regular pattern design. And if you remember Fern Street where the outdoor cinema was, that actually has some permanent asphalt. It's like stamped plastic melted into the asphalt that creates this design. And it's very regular, so drivers won't get confused. And we have some on Fern off of Polk, but also Eagle Plaza, and there's a lot of crosswalks now with this specific stuff. It's called, I forget what the name of it is. Asphalt Impressions is the company that does it, but it's enormously expensive. It's like $1 million for a street to do that. It's insane. So that right now is the only option. The other thing that I've seen is actually Parks Alliance did this with chalk paint. It actually lasts a while. And, I think that Susanna can probably talk a little bit more about that experience. But they had their chalk on moss that lasted forever because it didn't rain. And so you just had this like beautiful painted design in the streetway. So, yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. I seem to be holding the mic, so I'll go ahead. I'd be interested in hearing you speak more on how activation can be a step toward more permanent and perhaps larger scale transformations, and both in terms of engaging neighbors in thinking big about a space. I know south of Market, there's that space under the freeway at the 5th Street Street on-ramps, I think, and there's big plans for doing a lot with that. So as we get people thinking, try to get people thinking about more permanent, perhaps more costly improvements we can make that could be greener and more equitable, how does activation help us get there?
Sure, I can start us off. So this is something that I think about all the time. And I think smaller activations are the way to get people bought in. And once you can use them as an organizing tool. And the more people that see what you're doing, want to get involved, believe in the change, you can actually organize an articulated vision for the community. And when that, like in the form of like a vision plan, I've been a part of a neighborhood that actually did that. And once you have an articulated vision, you're able to get funding because it's been community vetted. It's much easier to get funding. I'm not going to guarantee you get funding, but and it's all about momentum. And so maybe your funding gets you a light, like a string lights across a street, and then that's in your portfolio, and so you can build on that, and then you can build the political capital because politicians want wins, and politicians see momentum happening, and also if there happens to be a development going up, being like, what if instead of just paving the sidewalk in your normal like city regulated thing you do, sidewalk gardens. So it's about activations for me are an organizing tool.
If I could just, I want to plug more Cultivate Labs with a K. They're a community partner of ours in SoMa, Filipinas. But they do a lot of our economic development work and activation of the night market that's happened for the last 4 years. But they really have like a really amazing kind of strategy on how to activate, unused spaces. The night markets have always been held on, open parking lots that they could, get permitting for, a festival, the market that would run twice or 3 times a year, 2 or 3 times a year. And then one of their bigger projects was the Kapwa Garden, which is on Mission between 5th and 6th, and that is will eventually be developed into senior housing. But for the time being, until that construction starts, they were able to get this empty lot and activate the space. It's a garden, it's a performance space, it's a meeting space. So there's a lot of detail into that, but I think those are some really good examples around how activation can lead to long-term or at least like 2-3 year programming in the site, and then eventually they have to think of something new to do with the space. But it's a good organization to look at.
Yeah, I appreciate that question, and I think for Skybridge at least, it built consistency, right? Speaking to some of the owners on that block, they were like, safer. Specifically on that block, they were like, yeah, it's safer. You because of these permits, they have to come out and sweep these streets. They'll clean them, and so. But that to me was the part that kind of like, if I had any takeaway, was the fact that like, yeah, it engaged the community, and in many ways it built identity. And one of the cool parts was that we'd be out there 8-9 o'clock, and there'd be families. In probably one of the roughest neighborhoods in the city, like that to me is like, wow, okay, that's an amazing, these kids are now gonna tie this community, not with the pains and the sorrows and the hardships, but more of this soulful music and engagement and beauty and friendships, and to me that's, gosh, you can't put a price on that, to have your families feel supported, safe, and to be able to walk down to their local street on a Thursday evening to grab some food, dinner, listen to an amazing band, let's dance, wow. I mean that's the San Francisco that I expect of my own family. So.
Well, we're going to close the session on that. At this time, I would like to thank Katy, Erica, Mario, and Sergio for our panelists. If you have any more further questions, the QR codes have been placed out on the tables and that were posted on the PowerPoint. You can go ahead and scan them and catch up with them there. We have a next session starting in this room momentarily. Thank you.